Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for lowpost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Scratch Essentials tutorial series, and today we're talking qualifiers. Now, if you are a colorist or a conform artist, you're probably familiar with qualifiers. Qualifiers are a way that you can get in, and you can utilize keying techniques to get in, isolate specific colors in a shot to get in and do secondary color correction. But what many people might not be aware of is the fact that we can utilize qualifiers inside of Assimilate Scratch to perform chroma key effects. Now you're going to notice in the next couple lessons we're starting to talk about effects. So I thought a great place to start would be to start to utilize some of the techniques we've learned up till this point, specifically talking about versions. And we're now going to take that and we're going to apply working with qualifiers, doing secondary color correction, and then take that to the next level by showing you how you can get in and now do chroma key effects inside of the qualifiers parameter of the color effects tab. Alright, so let's Command or Alt and Tab into Assimilate Scratch. Of course, we do need some footage to work with. I'm going to head to the desktop. Now you'll see that we have three shots on the desktop. We have our mime on a green screen, we have our background that we're going to use for him, and we have our shot of our birds. Now these are going to be used for two different examples as to how qualifiers work. One is going to be in the sense of doing secondary color correction, one is going to be used in the sense of doing a chroma key effect. So what I want to do is I want to bring in these two shots, but I'm not going to bring the mime in, which is going to be the foreground for our chroma key. We're actually going to attach that once we get into the color effects module. I'm going to say open, we're going to drop them into their slots. Let's head over to the color effects module and you'll see there is the shot with our two tropical birds. Alright, so let's talk about qualifiers. Qualifiers are a way for you to get in and pull keys from your footage, whether the key is an RGB key, a hue saturation values key, or even a chroma key, as we're going to use in a later example. Now to get things rolling, I'm just going to show you a little bit of how we can get in and add a secondary color correction to this shot. I'm going to navigate over to the qualifier category. The first thing we need to do is to choose the type of qualifier that we do want to do. Now, let's backtrack just for 1 second, because you'll remember in our previous lesson, we talked about getting in and adding versions. So let me just switch this up just a little bit here, and we'll add another version just so that we can switch back and forth between them to see the difference. Perfect. So let's now head to our qualifier. I'm going to choose an HSV, or a hue saturation value keyer. Now, once I select that keyer, you'll notice that things get a little bit weird on the screen. Now, by default, Show Matte is turned on. So what's actually happening here, you'll see that if I select just the matte only, we're actually being given a visual representation on the screen of what is happening with the matte. Now, what is the matte? Well, the matte right now is set to being yellow. So by default, anything that has some yellow in it, like for example, our parrot's feathers and a lot of the background do have yellow components to them. That's why they're being selected. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about that because we're about to get in and change that. And we're going to select the blue color of the bird's feathers because I'd really like to get in and just enhance that just a little bit, make it a little bit more bluer, make it stand out, punch out just a little bit further than it does now. So let's do this. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that you'll notice that as I move the mouse from our interface over the canvas, you'll see that we now get a color picker with a little zoom window that we can get in and be very precise about the color that we are going to be working with. Now, keep in mind again that if I come back to matte, you'll see that this is not exactly a solid matte, so it's not going to create as much of a vibrant color as I'd like it to. So what we do have the ability to do is I can come in and add the selected color to the softness range of the key. Now, you'll notice that we have S-, C-, C+, and S+. We can also add the selected color to the color range of the key if we want to, but for right now we're interested in just enhancing the color that we are working with. So I'm just going to select that a little bit more here. There we go, looking very nice. Okay, now just to show you a little bit of a difference between C+ and S+, if I wanted to get in and just add, you'll notice that as I'm adding, you can see down here that our range is being adjusted like that, so that it's included inside of our key. Okay, so now that we've gotten to this point, let's get in and let's enhance this blue. Now, let's be honest, it's a little bit on the jaggy side, so what I'd like to do is just give it a little bit of pre-blur, where I'd like to expand that out just a little bit, And we'll just give it a little bit of post blur here. There we go. I think that's looking pretty good. Keep in mind that we are just enhancing the colors and not changing them, so I don't need to worry too much about the bleed in from one color to another. Now, we don't have to worry about turning the show matte feature off, because once we switch over to balance, it will immediately switch off because we're not inside of our qualifier anymore. All I'm now going to do is just enhance that blue just a little bit to make it stand out, and you'll see that that is very different than what we had before. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another version. Let's just reset this version back to being what we'll call normal. And now you'll see that as I switch back and forth, that's a very different blue color that we have, a much more enhanced and popping blue color, just to help take this shot to the next level. Okay? So let's move on now, and let's take this concept and take it one step further, because we have essentially been doing keying inside of the qualifier tool. Now we're going to take, again, like I said, that concept one step further by talking about chroma keys. So let's come down to our next shot, which is right here. Perfect. Now we could get in and obviously do some correction on this just to give it a little bit more darkness in the black levels, but I'm going to leave it the way that it is for now. So let's now talk about getting in and adding our mime and doing our chroma key. Now, as always, we'll add another version. I'm going to select that version. And to add the mime to this shot, we can do it one of a couple ways. The way that I normally like to do it when doing chroma keys is I like to head down to our fill matte parameter. Now, once we're in the fill matte parameter, what I want to do is I want to add something to the front fill layer. Now, to do that, all I have to do is right click, and because that clip currently doesn't exist inside of Scratch, I'm going to import it. If it was over in the construct module, I could simply fetch the clip from there. But I'm going to import this clip, and it is going to be our mime. I'm going to say open, and we're going to drop him in the front layer. Now you'll notice that as soon as I do that, we now have the mime appearing over here in our layers. Okay? I can turn him off to see the background if necessary, but there we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to use our qualifier tool, and I'm going to choose a chroma key. Now keep in mind that a chroma key these days normally is not blue. A chroma key is normally green. So by default, Scratch will set that green to be green, or that chroma key color to be green, and you might think that this key is more or less good to go. However, it's not quite. I'm going to come down and I'm going to say, just show me the matte. Now you'll notice that we've got a little bit of garbage in here because the matte is not perfect. So what we have the ability to do is to come in and adjust some of the parameters here just to get things looking the way that we want. Now you'll notice that as I adjust the positive parameter, we start to get a little bit of noise over here inside of the black of the matte section, which is what is actually going to be transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to C+, and we're going to add the selected color to the softness range of the key again, and all I'm going to do now is just select that black, and we're now looking pretty darn good on this chroma key. Now, how do I know this? Because if I come back and say just show me the entire thing, you'll see it's looking very, very nice. Now, of course, because this element is keyed and it is isolated, what we do now have the ability to do is I'm going to come into our numeric parameters. I'm going to come over to the master lift, and we're just going to bring that down just a little bit. I'll bring my gain up just a little bit, and the white is not looking exactly the right shade of white that I'd like it to be. So of course at any point we can come in and we can adjust that white color to be really whatever color we want. Now, because we are going to assume that green is bleeding over everything, if I start to pull away from green, we're going to start to get our mime back looking the way that we want him to look. Now, something that I do want to draw your attention to, and that is that if you take a look at his hand, and even his shoulder for the most part, we've got a little bit of green bleed over. We do have the ability inside of the qualifier parameter to come in and choose what we'd like to do with the spill. Now, in most cases, I normally like to desaturate the spill. Now, what's also important to keep in mind is that you really notice it right there, okay? Now, we can get in and expand and contract the key if we want to. You'll notice that as I adjust the expand into the negative, it's widening out that key. What we want to do is we want to do it the other way. So I'm just going to bring it in just a little bit, not too much, because I just want to get rid of a little bit from his shoulder. Now what I'm going to do is for the desaturate parameter, let's now come in and adjust that so that we can now get that looking a little bit more like it should. Very, very nice. Now, there is one last thing that I do want to mention before we go on, and I did have a lot of, I'll say, luck with me when I was pulling this key, But there's certain situations where you're going to have a lot of junk that's happening out here. Maybe you're going to have a light stand here, or the chroma key wall's only going to go to here, and you actually need to get in and garbage mat out whatever your subject happens to be. Well, keep in mind that in our canvas parameter, right now our canvas is a rectangle, okay, which is very, very useful because the rectangle is the same size as our frame. But what we might need to do with this layer is switch over to a freeform mat or a freeform canvas. And you'll notice as soon as I select freeform, our mime disappears. Don't worry, our mime hasn't gone anywhere. I know you'll probably never hear anybody say that ever, but I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to draw a shape around the frame that we're going to say is a garbage mat. Now you'll see that as soon as my mime comes back, I just want to make sure that when I come down and edit this, that I put that like such. We're just going to bring this over just a little bit. And what we now have is a garbage mat around our mime so that no matter what happens outside of the garbage mat, like I said, light stand, end of a cyc wall or something like that, our mime is always going to be good to go in the frame. Okay. Now I also did this for a very specific reason. Okay, when you're working with your canvas and it's rectangular, the same size as your frame, when you come back to the fill mat parameters and you get in and start adjusting things like your translation X and Y, you'll notice that what it's doing is it's placing our talent inside of our canvas. But now we've come in and made an adjustment to the canvas's shape. So of course our mime disappears. Now, if I was to come in, let's just put this value back to 0, and I was to scale him down, like we're going to position him in the lower left-hand corner, and of course now I try to position him, it's not going to work the way that we want it to. I'm just going to undo what I just did right there. This is now where we're going to get in and adjust the canvas's position. Let's come to our canvas. Let's now get in and adjust its scale. Very nice. Okay. Now what we can do is we can place him wherever we want him to go. So let's just say to the lower left-hand corner of the screen like such. And our mime is now all set to go, keyed beautifully, color corrected, and positioned. So this shot would now be ready to go if this is what we needed to create. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowpost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.